We've got it. So, given the fact that what I'm going to speak on, Graham mentioned it, Samuel. And it's amazing the controversy that has been over what Samuel had said. Here am I, speak, Lord, thy servant heareth. Let's go through it. And if you've got a Bible and you want to turn up to 1 Samuel 3, please do so. I'm reading from the King James Version. The matter of interest, I don't know if you knew, King James was Scottish. Isn't that nice that the first man mentioned in the Bible is Scottish? King James, who authorized its translation. So let's go. And the child Samuel ministered unto the Lord before Eli. Eli is the Western way of saying it. In Hebrew, it's Eli. And the word of the Lord was precious in those days. There was no open vision. In other words, God was not communicating. He was not talking to anyone. He was keeping quiet. And it came to pass at that time when Eli was laid down in his place, in his bed, and his eyes began to wax dim that he could not see. He was old. And ere, meaning before, the lamp of God went out in the temple of the Lord, where the ark of God was, and Samuel was laid down to sleep. The lamp he's talking about is the menorah, where the central candles, and then the external ones. And these were kept alight by oil. And they would eventually peter out before dawn. So the word here is that before the lamp of God went out. So it must have been about 3 or 4 in the morning. And the Lord called Samuel, and he answered, Here am I. And he ran to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou callest me. And he said, I called not. Go down, lie down. And he went and lay down. And the Lord called again, Samuel. And Samuel arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And he answered, I called not, my son. Lie down again. This is confusing for Samuel, and it's confusing for Eli. Now, Samuel did not yet know the Lord. Like all Jewish boys, he was running around doing this. He wasn't even taught Hebrew. It was Aramaic, Babylonian, Assyrian, Greek, some Roman. None of them knew Hebrew, because Hebrew was kept strictly for the scriptures. And neither was a word of the Lord yet revealed unto him. And the Lord called Samuel yet again a third time. And he arose and went to Eli and said, Here am I, for thou didst call me. And Eli perceived that the Lord had called the child. Therefore Eli said unto Samuel, Go, lie down, and it shall be, if he call thee, that thou shalt say, Speak, Lord, for thy servant heareth. So Samuel went and lay down in his place. And the Lord came and stood. This is a nice little bit. The Lord came. All of a sudden, not only was his voice there, but his presence was there. God came and stood and called as the other times, Samuel, Samuel. Then Samuel answered, Speak, for thy servant heareth. Samuel was about 12 years old. He was actually given to Eli, or dedicated by his mother Hannah because she wanted a child so much she couldn't conceive. And then she said, God, if you give me a child, I will dedicate him. Isn't that interesting? Him, not she, but him to you. And he went there after he was weaned. It would have been about 4, maybe 5. And then he would do some tasks around the temple, sweep the floor, pick up rubbish. He would open the doors in the morning, he'd close them at night. And he would clean away the candles from the menorah. You know, the famous thing about this is that Samuel immediately said, "Here am I." And there's a meaning behind that. And it's interesting that this, "Here I am," or "Here am I," that was also said by Abraham when he was going to sacrifice his son. And God said, "Abraham." And he says, "Here am I." There's a meaning in that. And I'm going to explain it to you. Absolutely wonderful. And that was the first time it was ever said, but not the last. You see, "Here I am," this is taken to mean, here I am, and I am ready to do whatever is required. How many of us can say that? You know, the amazing thing that I'll do anything that's required is more important than "Speak, Lord, thy servant heareth." I will stand by what you want. This is where people are prepared to die. They're prepared to kill. David was prepared to go and kill Goliath. How many were prepared to go and kill when the walls of Jericho came tumbling down? You see, this is where, as I was growing up, I was hearing of, during the war, so many people that said, "No, I can't fight. I can't do it. I'm a conscientious objector." There's no such thing as a conscientious objector, because in the Bible, they misinterpreted it. They said, "Thou shalt not kill." That's not true. The word in the Bible is ratzuch. And ratzuch in Hebrew means "thou shalt not do murder." And there's a difference between going out into battle to fight for your country than there is to go and murder someone. And if there's anyone in here today, who is thinking, I couldn't do that. I really couldn't attack someone. And I wonder, if someone broke into your house and was going to hurt that little girl, if someone broke into your house and was going to hurt your wife, what are you going to do? Pray? Or are you going to attack? Because God says murder is the wrong thing, not kill. And he tells you have to defend your family, that you have to defend your country. He told that to the Jews. How amazing to think that the Jews had nothing. You know, when we talk about Samuel, at that time, the Jews didn't even have a homeland. And they never had a homeland for another 2,500 years. Because there was always some foreign entity governing Israel. You had the Babylonians, you had the Assyrians, you had the Persians, you had the Romans, the Greeks, you had more modern times it was Europe, like the Spaniards. And then you had the Nazis who were trying to wipe them out. And today you still got the same thing. People trying to wipe out the Jews. But there was something afoot. It's amazing to think that way back by 1917, the Balfour Declaration came forward to give the Jews a homeland, to give them Israel. And from 1917 to 1948, the fight went on in the British Parliament, French Parliament. It went on in Israel. But at the same time, we need to think of what was God doing? God was stirring the heart and mind of a man called Eliezer ben Yehuda. He was reading Ezekiel, Zechariah, and he's saying, but the Jews should have a language. You see, they didn't even have a language. They'd been slaves in Babylon, so what did they speak? Jesus himself never spoke Hebrew. He spoke Aramaic. And the amazing thing is that the Jews throughout time lost their language. And you can say, oh, yeah, but there's Yiddish. Yiddish is a crude language of whatever country they live in. So Polish Yiddish is similar to German Yiddish, but it's not the same. And that is similar to Hungarian Yiddish, but it's not the same. Nor is it the same to Russian Yiddish. So here you find the Jews not only didn't have a homeland, they didn't have a language. And God stirred the heart of Theodor Herzl to get a Zionist movement going. And he was this guy that said that the Jews should return to Israel as soon as they got independence. Amazing thing. 11 minutes after David Ben-Gurion, the then prime minister, the first prime minister of Israel, when he declared Israel a state, 11 minutes later, you can believe this if you like, all the neighbors joined together and attacked Israel. Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Saudi Arabia, Yemen, Lebanon, they all attacked Israel. And Israel was outgunned, outskilled, and outarmed. They were not supported by America nor Britain. They stood alone. Do you know they didn't even have a cannon or a tank? They only had 9 obsolete aircraft. How many troops? 19,000. That's all they had that were equipped and ready to go to fight for Israel. And there was the Islamic Council said this will be a final massacre and elimination. Boy, was he wrong. I love it. God took hold, and when the dust settled, when that dust settled, there emerged an independent state of Israel. The people who had a dream when God had said, people, they had stood and said, here am I. And you think those people got together and made the state of Israel. And it was the hand of God that fulfilled that, the prophecy of Ezekiel 36. This amazing story came about by people obeying God. Not saying, well, I like to worship this way. No, see, that's not really me. I do it this way. Sorry, God wants it his way, and he'll use you. How many times has God used the person that was least expected? He's using one right now. It's something I've always looked at and thought, but this is not natural for me. It's the most, would I say, uncomfortable? I remember the first time I did public speak, it was at my wedding. I got as far as, on behalf of my wife and myself, and I burst into tears. Speaking doesn't come naturally. So you've got to learn how to do it. And that's, Samuel was learning what to do and learning about God without even knowing he was being taught. And that should be our children in here. That it's a place to be, to learn and love, and they don't even know they're learning. I was brought up in the Brethren. Do everyone know what the Brethren is? Yeah, jeez. They're the ones, you know, I'll never forget, Mr. Maxwell. I'm so happy to be a Christian. And I thought, man, if that's happy, I don't want it. But what he meant was that the life that he had, the choice between that and Christianity, he would take Christianity anytime. That was the number one thing for him. And being brought up in the Brethren, you had to learn by, like kids in Sunday school, by the time they're about 8 or 9, they've got to learn half of the Old Testament books: Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy, Joshua, Judges, Ruth, 1 Samuel, 2 Samuel. And they've got to learn that as kids. And by the time they reach 12, they've got to know the whole of the Old Testament. And then they've got to go on to the New Testament. By the time they're 15, they've got to be able to preach to the little ones. They've got to help take Sunday school. It's a training ground. We're fighting a war. And the war comes in many guises of the enemy. There's one enemy, Satan. And he'll use Russia, and he'll use Iraq, Iran. He will use anything. And the war is on. And we need to educate our kids to be able to fight that war. Just like Samuel. Back to Theodore Herzl. He wanted a Zionist movement. You don't need to be a Jew to be a Zionist, by the way. Did you know that? I'm a Zionist. Through and through. Israel for Jews. And I can't understand anything else. God gave Israel that land. Do you know that he gave it from the Euphrates to the Nile? From the top end of that country, Iraq, Iran, all the way down. Round about 600,000 square kilometers. Amazing to think that that land, God gave it to the Jews. What's left? Israel. How many in here, do you know how big Israel is? The land? You could, yeah, okay. In comparison to Australia, where would Israel fit? Victoria? It would take 3 Israels to fit into Tasmania. How interesting is that, to think that the strongest country in the Middle East that was rejected, exterminated, killed, massacred, is now the one that is supplying Europe 1.3 billion euros worth of fruit. Mark Twain, when he made his journey to Israel, and he wrote when he got back to America, in our tour, we never saw one human being. The land was a desolate desert that had given up everything. The two loyal produces, the olives and the cactus, were even missing from the desert because Israel was a desolate place. And yet God promised that it would flourish. And today, 1.3 billion of fruit, citrus fruit especially, is being sent to Europe from Israel. Is that the hand of God? You know, you've got to think about it. How great are the Jews? When you think what they've done, they have come from nothing. They invented and discovered and produced drip fertilization. And they turned a desert into a flourishing Garden of Eden. The Jews, when you think about it, for all they've done throughout history, is try to survive. And in surviving, what else have they done? If you take the last 900 laureates from the Nobel Prizes, and that's for science, medicine, education, peace, whatever you want to do it. If you take that, there's around about 900, the last 900, the Jews, who have a population worldwide of 0.19%. That's around about 14 million Jews. And the reason they don't have many more is because they were exterminated in the Second World War. Just like the Babylonians before them, the Germans tried to get rid of them. They didn't manage it. Some survived. And here they are, with a population of 14 million people, which is 0.19%. They have got 230 Nobel Prizes. In contrast, the Islamic population, and I'm not decrying, I'm showing the difference. Theirs is 23% of the world population. How many laureates have they had? 12. Do you think God's got something to do with this? I do. The people, God's children, who most of the world has tried to get rid of, and God's made them smart. Amazing what they can do. When they had nothing, they still fought every neighbor and won. And they'll do it again. But around about 1948, Israel got its independence. Eliezer ben Yehuda, he was reading Ezekiel in the Bible, or the Torah, the Talmud, and as he's reading it, he thought, why don't we speak Hebrew? Because German Jews are different from Polish Jews, and different from Russian Jews, and Hungarian Jews, and British Jews, and we don't have a language that can keep us together. And yet, that's the one thing about a nation. when it's got its language, that's what helps keep it together. Take the Australians. For all of its mistakes in speaking the English language, they're still proud of being an Australian and still proud to say, Annie Gallon. Because it's theirs. So here we are with the Jews not even having a language, and Eliezer ben Yehuda said, from now on, when people come to my house, the only language we speak is Hebrew. Because Hebrew had been kept for theological reasons only, religious reasons. So he said, no, this is the Hebrew language. I'm a Jew. I'm going to speak this. And my children will speak it, and we will only speak Jewish in this house. And when visitors came, it was the same thing. No Yiddish, Hebrew. And all of a sudden, they started to, oh, that's great. I think I'll do that in my house. And so it started. I love the expression of Robert Schuller, inch by inch, everything's a cinch. And one by one, family started to speak Hebrew until it was being taught in schools. Today, it's taught to Jews and non-Jews. We should all learn a little bit of Hebrew. It's good. So thank you to Eliezer ben Yehuda. And by stirring up the hearts of Jews around the world, most Jewish people today, from the age of 12, male and female, can definitely read Hebrew. They may not be able to understand it, but they can read it. I can read Indonesian. Do I understand it? No, but I can read it. And that's what was happening with them. And today, when a young man has his bar mitzvah, this is when the father says, he's no longer my son. He's a man. He is responsible for himself at 13. And the kid has got to go up to the altar and read the Torah on his own. He's got to say it in Hebrew. I've got at home, if any of you ever want to see it, let me know, I'll bring it in. It's called a Chumash. C-H-U-M-A-S, Chumash. And when you open it up, you've got to start at the back that way. And the top part is written in Hebrew. Then the middle is written in how it's pronounced in the English spelling. And the bottom part is written in English. And it's fantastic. We had a slide that electronics got away from us. I'm happy for you to see this. Come and see this later if you want. It's written in Hebrew, then it's written how it should be pronounced, and the last part is what was said. So thank you, Eliezer ben Yehuda. There was another one, Theodore Herzl. He wanted the Zionist movement. He got it. And isn't it amazing how in that itch that needed to be scratched, it suddenly became worldwide. It spread. And Jews all around the world are Zionists. And you can be a Zionist. It's where you want Jews for Israel, Israel for Jews. The third important man in 1948 was David Ben-Gurion, the first prime minister, and he was the one who led them through the first war they had 11 minutes after the state was formed. You know, God fulfilled the prophecy of Ezekiel 36. This amazing story of the Jewish people, I've only touched the surface. It's fascinating when you delve deeper and deeper into Jewish history. Believe me, it helps you understand Christianity so much better. And this nationalistic pride that they had, that Ben-Gurion told the Jews, come, you must make Aliyah. Doing Aliyah is going to Israel. It's returning home. This is, when you look at a homeless people, he's telling them, come home. And you've got the Ashkenazis and you've got the Sephardi's. That's the two main ones. But then you've got the Oriental Jews, and then you've got the black Jews from Africa. And it's amazing to think that they are all welcome. When you think about Israel, the troubles that it has, when you look at the Israeli parliament, you know there's Muslims in the Israeli parliament, women. The Israeli parliament was the first one to get women to take a position. They had an amazing prime minister in Golda Meir, and she directed the warring Israelis through the second war. When you think, a woman who in the Middle East is normally classified as a second-rate citizen, took the lead position and led the Israeli army. When you look at the Middle East today, it's in the news. A young girl of 21 was taken to prison because her hijab was not pulled further down her face, and she died there. Another girl was stoned because she wasn't wearing the hijab. This is where women are suppressed. Not in Israel. They're raised up. You know that in Sabbath, every Sabbath, Friday night, as soon as 3 stars appear in the sky, that's the start of Sabbath. It's not by the clock, it's by the stars. It's what God tells you. And you cannot start Sabbath until the woman prays for the candles, the light of God. Each prayer the Jews say for Sabbath begins with Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu. Blessed are you, provider of whatever it is. If it's over the wine, it's blessed are you, provider of the fruit of the vine. You see, they keep giving God the honor. The only thing wrong with Jewish is they don't believe in the Messiah. They still think everyone's got to make Aliyah, and once every Jew has made Aliyah, then Messiah will come. He's coming. We know that. And I hope a lot more Jews do too. You know, the amazing story about this Jewish people of the slavery, the extermination, the abuse. Just think, they never had a homeland for 2,500 years. And then when they did get it, 11 minutes after they got it, there's a war trying to get rid of them. And what did the Muslims say? They said, where do you want the Jews to go? They're right on the water's edge. He says, into the sea. And what did the Jews say? When the earthquake happened in Lebanon, who was the first international medical team on board? The Jews. Talk about forgiveness. And there they were, the first there. They've got an amazing record. And this came about because people obeyed God. They answered his call. And the argument about speak, Lord, thy servant heareth, or speak, Lord, thy servant is listening, is about to be answered. It comes from the Torah. As Amar Shmuel. Shmuel is Samuel. And it's spelled S-H-M-U-E-L. Shmuel. Diber ki avaka shomea. So spoke Samuel. Speak, because your servant is listening. How beautiful to think that, you might say, what's the difference? Listening, hearing. You're sitting here and you're listening to me. Well, I hope you're listening to me. Those who aren't, I hope you've had a nice sleep. But the listening is when you hear my voice and I'm speaking. But you can also hear the air conditioner going. I just drew your attention in that, didn't I? That's when you can hear a baby cry in the background or talk. That's hearing. Listening is when you're paying attention. And you're going to leave here today. And I wonder what you'll take with you. God's speaking to you. If he can do this with the Jewish people, with their country, what can he do to this church? He's calling you. And are you going to say, here I am? Or are you going to be like me when I would come home from work and I'd walk straight in, get on the computer, and I was studying at the time. I wanted to get this thesis done. So I'm typing away, and my wife would call and she'd say, Jack, dinner's ready. I said, okay. And I'd keep going. I wanted to get this done. And she'd call again. Jack, yeah, come on. It's on the table. Okay, I'll be there. Right, I'm coming. And she'd wait. Jack, come on. I said, I hear you. She said, yeah, but are you listening? How true. How true. And that's it. God's calling you. He wants you to do a certain job. He doesn't want you to do it your way. Forget that. Oh, but no, this is the way I do it. No. He's going to give you the word. He's going to give you what you will need. Just like Samuel, uneducated, 10 or 12 years old, a kid, and yet he was already earmarked to be a prophet. God's got something for you to do. And I'd love you to do it. So, are you listening or are you hearing? Because there's a big difference. Thank you, God.